Hello, and welcome back to another episode of The Spirits of Independence. My name is Thomas Watson, and once again, I'd like to introduce my friend and travel companion, Bob Moldenhauer. When our last show ended, Bob and I were fast asleep in the home of Bob's sister, Lynn Moldenhauer, in Irmo, South Carolina. Lynn was an amazing host, and her generosity saved Bob and I from having to set up our tent by flashlight for the second night in a row. This show will feature the sights we saw on May 28, 1991, a day that took us to the furthest point south on our 17-day trip. It was also on this day when Bob and I first realized we weren't alone. There was no doubt, at least in our minds, that we were being assisted in our quest by the signers of the Declaration of Independence themselves. It's hard to explain, but we could feel their presence, and it's a feeling that neither Bob or I will ever forget. So kick back, sit a spell, and enjoy the show. After Mongo and I said our goodbyes to Lynn, we were off to the South Carolina State House in Columbia, which is only 10 miles south of Irmo. That 140-year-old building, which was located in the heart of Columbia, featured a dome that was situated 180 feet above the palmetto trees that had surrounded the historic State House. We also saw dozens of brass stars on the outside walls, which marked the areas where U.S. Army artillery shells struck the building during the Civil War. Columbia was virtually destroyed during the February 17, 1865 attack by Sherman's army. The state capital of South Carolina in Columbia. comes Mongo, fresh, going to the can. These are pretty nice Capitol grounds here. At 10 o'clock, Bob and I crossed the Savannah River into Georgia at the northern outskirts of Augusta. With Bob behind the wheel of our Omni, we headed past the Augusta National Golf Club, home of the Masters tournament, as we made our way to the Signers Monument. After a handful of wrong turns, which seemed to be a normal occurrence, we found the 50-foot tall granite monument in the center of Green Street. Oh, we're turning back onto Green Street since I screwed up. And there's the Signers Monument right there. Now we just have to find a parking spot.
Oh, I gotta go by the bank.
The wall over there. Drop on the floor up now.
Lyman Hall was a physician, clergyman, statesman, and the 16th governor of Georgia. As a representative of Georgia, Hall served in the Continental Congress from 1775 to 1780. Although Hall worked tirelessly as a committeeman, he usually did not participate in congressional debates. In fact, many historians believe the three Georgia signers played no significant role in the independence debates. When the British captured Savannah, both of Hall's homes were torched and he was accused of high treason. George Walton was a lawyer who served in the Continental Congress as a Georgia delegate from 1776 to 1778. Walton was also a colonel of the 1st Georgia Militia, two-time governor of Georgia, a United States senator, and a congressman. At age 26, Walton was the youngest Georgia signer of the Declaration of Independence and was a political ally of Scotch-Irish General Lachlan McIntosh and a foe of fellow signer Button Gwinnett. In the 1777 duel between McIntosh and Gwinnett, which resulted in Button's death, Walton was eventually censured from Congress in 1783 for his role. During the defense of Augusta in 1779, Walton was shot in the thigh, fell from his horse, and was captured by the British. He was held captive for 2 years before being exchanged for a British naval officer. The Signers Monument is a granite obelisk that is 12 feet square at its base and tapers to a height of 50 feet. The monument is situated in the middle of Green Street, directly in front of the Augusta Municipal Center, which in 1848 was the location of City Hall. While all three Georgia signers of the Declaration of Independence are recognized on the monument, only Hall and Walton are interred there. The remains of Gwinnett were never located at the cemetery in Savannah. Lyman Hall died on October 19, 1790 at the age of 66 while living at his plantation, Montville, located near Shell Bluff, Georgia, which is a little over 25 miles south of Augusta. Hall was originally buried on the grounds of Montville. George Walton died on February 2, 1804 at the age of 55. He was survived by his wife Dorothy, whom he married in 1775, and one of his two sons. Walton was originally buried at Rosny, home of his nephew Robert Watkins, but was reinterred alongside fellow delegate Lyman Hall beneath the Signers Monument in 1848. Our time at the Signers Monument in Augusta marks the fourth and fifth Signers graves we visited on the trip, with only 51 left to find. Back in the Omni for the short drive to Walton's home, Meadow Garden, Bob and I found the boyhood home of 28th President Woodrow Wilson only a block or two from the Signers Monument. Young Thomas Woodrow Wilson lived in this house from 1860 to 1870, where he witnessed the Civil War and the Reconstruction. It's believed young Tommy Wilson was profoundly impacted by living through the Civil War, and this directly influenced his reluctance to commit the United States to World War I.
Well, as you can see, it's the boyhood home of Woodrow Wilson, our 28th president. I wonder if he owned a beauty salon.
Inside is completely gutted. Nothing but floor.
After we had finished our short visit at the Wilson boyhood home, the two of us drove 2 miles west where we found historic Meadow Garden, the beloved home of George Walton. Meadow Garden was built in 1794 and was where George Walton died on February 2nd, 1804. Upon our arrival, Bob and I photographed the exterior of the house before we paid the $2 fee for a tour of the inside.
Well, let's walk over to the front yard of Meadow Garden. There's Mongo over there getting ready to take some pictures. Underneath the tree we go. And what be? And we're gonna zoom in on Old Glory flying over Meadow Garden. Okay, how do we get to Meadow Garden? Just follow the red brick road. Ooh, what knockers. Go ahead, Mongo, give her a knock. Open it up. Locked?
Those are $2. It should be open, right?
You see any people in here? Okay, we had to go around to the back of this place to get in.
Come on in, young man.
Hi, yeah.
Hello. How are you?
Fine.
Okay, it's $2 each. We have allowed walls until you get the house. We think the kitchen and dining room will probably be a separate building out in the back. This workroom and kitchen up underneath the house. All the furniture, this is the living room of George Walton's home, and all the furniture was made in the late 18th. And, they decorated this room. It was purchased for the price of $2,500, and then they had it ready to open to the public by November of 1901. The furniture is Victorian, and it's made from rosewood and horsehair. The piano is a Gibson Davis spinet, and it dates back possibly as early as 1802. There are only 3 others in the southeast that we know of. One is in Charleston, South Carolina. There's one in Virginia. And then the third is here in Augusta at the Ezekiel Harris house. So we're very fortunate to have 2 right here in Augusta. The picture over on the north wall is Octavia Walton Levert. She was George Walton's granddaughter, and she was the grandmother of his last direct descendant. Her grandson, George Walton Reed, died here in Augusta in 1925, and he never married. So that ended the lineage of George Walton directly. The picture over the mantel is George Walton. It's a charcoal reproduction done by Sarah Potter in 1903. It was copied from a small, tiny original that measured only 1 1/8 by 1 3/8 inch. The miniature was painted, it was a watercolor on ivory painted by Charles Wilson Peale. And where are you from?
We're just from north of Detroit. About an hour north of Detroit. Well, I used to be an hour north of Detroit.
Oh, is this George Walton's bedroom that I'm in right now?
We think this was their home, but we think that their boys probably slept in one of these rooms, and a servant slept in the other when they were small. Because of the having to climb a
This print right here, this looks
that's
like
Washington and his generals. There's only 1 or 2 air vents up here, maybe just 1. And it's always hot. They should have put one in this hallway.
Now that doll in that rocking chair, how far does that date
Dates
back?
back to about 1850. The quilt on the bed dates back to about 1886, and it's called an album quilt. You may be interested in this, and the showcase is called a lady's travel case, and it's said to contain everything a lady would need on a journey. You might recognize some of the little pieces in the trays. The 2 trays fit back down over the little glass bowl there in the center.
Our tour of Meadow Garden was fantastic as we had immersed ourselves in the world of George Walton. Our tour guide was great too, as there's nothing better than the sound of a Southern accent. With our Walton experience finished, Bob and I packed up our gear and headed for Shell Bluff, Georgia, which was about 25 miles south of Augusta. Once we had made it to the tiny dot on our map, it turned out Shell Bluff consisted of only the Shell Bluff Country Store, which worked out well as that store was our only source of directions which led us to Montville, or what was left of Lyman Hall's plantation, which was 2 miles east of the store along Route 80. We finally made it to the site. Bob and I saw a sign alongside the road that was near the entrance to the property. This site was very intriguing to the 2 of us for a couple of reasons. This was not only the grounds where Lyman Hall's plantation Montville was once located before it was destroyed, but it was also the plantation where Hall died and where the signer was originally buried. Bob and I had a decision to make. Should we climb over the locked gate with the keep out sign to look for the ruins of Hall's plantation? We took a moment to think over the situation, looked at the bullet holes in the roadside marker, and decided to obey the keep out sign on the gate.
Yeah, those are bullet holes, all right.
When we left Shell Bluff behind in our rear view mirror, the two of us were headed for Savannah, Georgia. That 125-mile drive took us to the southernmost point of our trip. But when Bob parked the Omni alongside Colonial Park Cemetery in the heart of Savannah at 3 o'clock, there was a definite threat of rain in the air. With no time to waste, Bob and I hustled into the cemetery with one goal in mind: find the gravesite of signer Button Gwinnett. Spanish moss hung from the trees, which were motionless in the still, humid afternoon air. Shortly after we entered the huge, seemingly neglected burial ground, we saw the cenotaph dedicated to Button Gwinnett in the distance. It turned out Gwinnett was buried in an unmarked grave, and in 1964, 15-foot tall monument was erected to honor the signer of the Declaration of Independence.
There's your cemetery, all right.
That's Gwinnett's right over there.
Yep, Colonial Park. Grass could use to be cut. Yep, that's his. Boy, this place is really looking shabby.
You got it in good shape for Memorial Day.
Yeah. You can see all the moss hanging off the trees. That's our farthest point south, Mongo. That's it. Now we're gonna head north. And sure in the heck won't be cooler.
Signer Button Gwinnett was born in England and was a merchant, planter, the second governor of Georgia, and a member of the Second Continental Congress representing Georgia from May to October 1776. Gwinnett voted for independence on July 4th, 1776, signed the parchment copy on August 2nd, and shortly after signing, he returned to Georgia to help draft that state's first constitution. Gwinnett had numerous clashes with political foe Lachlan McIntosh, including the final one after Button was defeated in his bid for a governorship in May of 1777. McIntosh publicly declared Gwinnett was a scoundrel and lying rascal, fairly harsh words in 1777. He challenged McIntosh to a duel, which was held on May 16, 1777 at the estate of Governor Wright near the town of Thunderbolt. At a distance of 12 feet, each man fired his pistol and were struck. However, Gwinnett's shattered leg turned gangrenous and he died 3 days later. Button Gwinnett died on May 19, 1777 at the age of 42 near Savannah, Georgia. Shortly after his death, the signer's remains were believed to be buried in an unknown location within Colonial Park Cemetery. Ironically, the grave of Lachlan McIntosh, who survived the duel and died in 1806, was located nearby in the same cemetery. Since Gwinnett died less than a year after signing the Declaration, his autograph is by far the most valuable signature of any American. There are only 51 known examples of Button's signature, and it's now valued at over $700,000. After Bob and I photographed our documents on the monument dedicated to Button Gwinnett, it marked the 6th signer on our quest to all 56. Now it was time to head north. Even though it was sprinkling slightly when we left Colonial Park Cemetery, by the time we crossed the Savannah River and back into South Carolina at 4:22 p.m., the rain's intensity had begun to increase. By the time we exited off I-95, it was nearly impossible to see out of the windshield as our wipers could not keep up with the downpour. At times, we contemplated pulling off the road until the storm passed. However, we slowly trudged on. Bob had driven us to within a mile of our next destination when suddenly the rain completely stopped. It seemed as though we had driven out from behind Niagara Falls and the road was completely dry. It was at that moment when the two of us first mentioned that we were possibly being helped, guided along, so to speak, by the signers themselves. We could feel it. We could feel their presence. And truth be told, Bob and I welcomed the spirits because we figured we would need some sort of help and a lot of luck if we wanted to complete our ambitious mission. With the rainstorm only a mile behind us, we arrived at the Hayward Family Cemetery, which was located near the site of the Old House Plantation and not too far from Ridgeland, South Carolina. A historical sign marked the entrance to the site, and a sandy two-track pathway led us nearly 1 mile off the main road towards the burial ground. Moss-covered trees provided a canopy over the bumpy path, and it seemed as though we were being transported back in time, as this cemetery was truly in the middle of nowhere. Once we arrived, the two of us wasted no time, as it seemed the rain was headed our way.
I can't believe another car in there. Old house. So hold on, I'll get this sign here. There's a goddamn horse in the road. An intelligent looking animal. Horse? He didn't say anything. I ruled about Mr. Ed being here. Going through kind of our small version of the Avenue of Oaks. Hey, some ducks up ahead. There's a boat over there. Holy shit. A scarecrow out there. Yeah, here it goes.
Okay, here we go into the little family cemetery of Thomas Hayward Jr. Haven't spotted any of the little crabs that were here last time. And this is out in the middle of nowhere. See any of those little crabs yet, Mongo? Here's the actual grave of Thomas Hayward. It's starting to rain here. This is one final look at the gravesite of Thomas Hayward Jr. and his family cemetery. There's the Molino taking a stroll.
Is that the only crab around here that little one is on?
Yeah, I think it's time to head on out.
Thomas Hayward Jr. was a lawyer, a member of the Continental Congress representing South Carolina from 1775 to 1778, and a judge. Hayward not only signed the Declaration of Independence just 5 days after his 30th birthday, he also penned his name to the Articles of Confederation. During the siege of Charleston in 1780, Hayward was captured and imprisoned in St. Augustine, Florida for a year. While in prison, his Whitehall plantation was plundered and his wife became ill and died. After his release from prison, Hayward nearly drowned when he fell overboard from a ship that was transporting him up to Philadelphia. Thomas Hayward Jr. died on March 6, 1809, at the age of 62 at his home known as the Old House Plantation, which was built on these grounds in 1740 by Daniel Hayward. Originally 500 acres, the plantation grew to 16,000 acres before it was all destroyed by fire in 1865. All that remains is the Hayward Family Cemetery, where I'm standing in this image. When Bob and I were finished paying tribute to Thomas Hayward Jr., the two of us knew we had just visited one of the more remote grave sites on the trip. It was also the seventh signer's grave on our endeavor, which meant we had only 49 left to visit. Just as the two of us were about to leave the cemetery, it began to sprinkle. Bob and I laughed because we knew the spirits of independence had kept the rain away just long enough for us to complete our visit. Rain once again fell on our Omni as we left the Old House Plantation site and the Hayward family behind. But 75 miles later, when Bob and I arrived at our KOA campground just outside of Ladson, South Carolina, the rain had stopped and the skies had cleared. The two of us figured that campground was in the perfect location for the following day's first site, which was Middleton Place, the home of signer Arthur Middleton that opened at 9 a.m. Following a gourmet dinner at Taco Bell, Bob and I cooled off in the pool before we called it quits for the day. But there was a problem, and no, it wasn't due to the taco fumes. We heard a bad storm was coming our way. We were about to find out just how waterproof our shelter would be during the night. Bob and I retired for the night in our tent at about 10 p.m., but were jolted awake by an impressive thunderstorm at roughly 2 a.m. The wind was intense, and a heavy downpour of rain pummeled our humble tent. But other than a couple of drops that seeped through a corner of the tent's roof, thankfully, the two of us remained relatively dry. Once again, there was an unexplained force that have protected us. My friend Bob Moldenhauer and I hope you've enjoyed our travels through Georgia and South Carolina on this episode of The Spirits of Independence. On the next episode, the two of us will visit 4 more signers' grave sites as we make our way around the Charleston, South Carolina area. It'll surely be an episode you won't want to miss. And do us a favor, subscribe to this channel so you won't miss any of the shows, and please hit that like button. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode of The Spirits of Independence.